Hello, hello, and welcome back to Retrieving Sanity with your podcast host, Keegan, and this is your podcast for all mental health, addiction, recovery issues, and topics. Sorry. And today we have a very special guest, a psychotherapist and the author of one of my very favorite books, Constructive Wallowing, How to Beat Bad Feelings by Letting Yourself Have Them. And she is here today so we can talk to her all about it and hear from her and see what her story's like. So, hello, Tina. How are you doing?
Hello, I'm very good. How are you today, Keegan?
I'm doing well. I'm super excited to speak to you because your book has changed my life. So,
That's
but,
amazing to hear.
mm-hmm. and that is not a like overstatement either because it is what got the ball rolling for me in rehab. And that's really what got me connected back to my feelings because uh, in earlier episodes, I had mentioned that as a man in our society, I've been taught that I can be happy, angry, hungry, and horny, and that's
Right.
pretty much it.
Yeah.
And so my therapist gave me a little feeling wheel and your book and was like, here you go. And it took me a while to read it, but is because I wanted to internalize it. So
Yeah.
I'm excited to speak to you about it. And I also see that you're doing stuff with estranged adult children, correct?
Right. Yeah, I'm
Sweet.
I'm actually focusing on parents of
Okay.
those estranged adult children because it feels like, lots of therapists are good with estranged adult children.
Mm-hmm.
They have a lot of understanding and sympathy, but it's a little bit harder to find therapists who are really experienced in working with parents who
Mm.
are unwillingly estranged from their adult children. Their adult children have gone non-contact, no contact, and they've said, "I don't want to talk to you anymore," or they haven't said anything.
Mm-hmm.
And the parents are just kind of left wondering what happened. How did we
Yeah.
get here? So that's who I kind of focus on helping right now.
That's awesome.
Mhm.
And that does definitely sounds like a demographic that a lot of people don't think about because it's not a one-way street all the time. It's a two-way street. And
Mhm.
sometimes, just like addiction, we don't get to see our way or the other person's way.
Right.
From my uh, guess, at least, right? So, um,
Yeah.
I do have a couple of questions, but first of all, would you like to just tell us a little bit about yourself? Just like where you're from, what got you into psychotherapy, all that kind of stuff?
Sure. Yeah.
All right.
Well, I guess my relevant story starts when I was 30 and sort of
Okay.
stumbled upon therapy and
Uh,
realized, hey, there's a world of emotions here and they all have names and it's okay. And I just had just an amazing experience in therapy, kind of coming home to myself, sitting with
mm,
someone, another human being, my therapist, who found me just completely acceptable, even when I was being childish or sad or, throwing a fit, being angry. She kind of made sense of all of that with me and made me
mm,
feel really okay, really like I was okay. And I think that changed really the course of my life because at the time I was working in a job that was cool but wasn't very meaningful. And I decided after some introspection to pay it forward and become a therapist. So 10 years later, at the age of 40, I graduated with a master's degree in counseling psychology, and I started my career as a therapist helping other people. And
wow.
so my first book, Constructive Wallowing, was the result of having a lot to say, both personally because of my experience and also as a therapist, sitting with other
Mm,
people struggling with difficult feelings. I
mm,
felt like, why, I have to write all this down, you know? There was
uh,
just so much there. So that's how Constructive Wallowing came to be.
mm. That is just way too cool. Uh, and I love that story because you're coming from a place of need as well. You have that gift of desperation, if you will.
Right.
And so you're able to really relate to those people that are on their last whim, that don't know where else to go, and go, therapy, they're hesitant, they're apprehensive, but that's kind of the way society is nowadays, but less so. And it's great that you're stepping into that role to help normalize therapy and to help those that don't even know that they may need it.
That's a
like
good way
myself.
of Yeah, that's a good way of putting it, to normalize therapy. I still feel like there's a stigma about it. I still
Mm-hmm.
find people who believe that only, really like sick people need therapy or should need therapy, or if they go to
Mm-hmm.
therapy, they're going to be told what's wrong with them,
Mm-hmm.
rather than what I think of therapy as being, which is learning that you're lovable, learning that you are whole already, that you were
Mm-hmm.
born whole, and that any problems that you've had in relationships and in life kind of are very often born out of wounding of that
Mm-hmm.
perfectly whole person who's adapting to difficult circumstances
Hmm.
with different kinds of behaviors and stuff. So I feel like therapy, it should bring us home to ourselves and help us love ourselves more, not feel like we're broken and we need to be fixed.
Oh yeah, for sure. uh, because I know whenever it was explained to me through the prodigal son story,
Hmm.
uh, how he came to himself. You saying I came home to myself, that just kind of clicked that same bell, and I was like, oh hey, yeah, I remember that, and that
Yeah,
feeling is beyond measure, because
right.
that's what I had in therapy and everything too. So it was kind of like there was a missing piece that whole time, and I never knew about it. But let me put it this way: I didn't know that there actually was that piece there for me, because, like you said, I thought all these bad things about it. Like I had already seen a psychiatrist, so that was years before. So why do I need therapy? I already have
Hmm.
medication,
Yeah.
but medication is just like the band aid for mental health, in my opinion.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
I
It
think
can be.
therapy and that inner work is the real, what I could say, treatment, or at least what we could define as treatment for mental health. Because for me, I think, do we do we ever really get rid of traumas or those wounds, or is it just something that we learn how to cope with and adapt around?
Wow, that's a huge question. And I would let survivors of trauma answer that each for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Because some people will say it's with me every day, it always will be. Some people will say I feel, somewhat healed. But
Mm-hmm.
I really think it's a very personal experience. I do
Yeah.
believe that healing as a process is possible for everyone. Are we ever the same
Mm-hmm.
after a trauma?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not. Maybe
Yeah.
we're never the same.
Mm-hmm.
But are we stronger in the places where we were cracked before? Possibly. So
Mm.
maybe not the same, maybe different, but strong
Mm-hmm.
and whole in a new way, perhaps. I mean, that's, I think,
Oh.
the goal of healing from trauma.
Ah, I really like the way you put that. And the way you put that, replacing everything with stronger pieces. For some reason, it reminded me of that old analogy with that ship. If you take an old ship and you start replacing it piece by piece,
Hmm.
after the end, is it the same ship? And it's
Yeah,
like,
that's,
it is, and it's not. But,
well, yeah,
like,
it's like the body. If you think about the cells of the body, we don't have a single cell, I don't think, that is the
uh
same as we were born with right now.
uh So are we the same people? It's about a 7 year cycle, I think, all the way through to the bones, even. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
but yet there's something that endures about us,
Mm-hmm.
right? So when I think of trauma and piecing back together, I think of those pieces as being the original pieces, but the glue as being the strength. Like the
Mm-hmm.
repair is what makes the
Mm-hmm.
strength, not that the pieces have necessary. I mean, we're just quibbling about metaphors here,
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah,
you know,
yeah.
uh, I do. One of the reasons that I love doing the work of therapy is I have tremendous faith in people's
Mm-hmm.
ability to heal. I just keep seeing it. That's what keeps me coming to work all the time and working with really difficult problems. Is I
Mm.
just have this eternal faith and confidence in people's will to heal and their will to grow, despite
Mm.
amazing, just like devastating impacts on their lives from various things.
Yeah. It is inspiring what the human spirit is capable of, and
Absolutely. Yeah.
determination, grit, all of that. In the deepest, darkest times, watching someone shine out of it is truly one of those things that makes everyone just go, I can do that too.
Yeah.
And oh, go ahead.
It's inspiring, but it can also be confusing
Yeah.
because when someone has experienced like post traumatic growth, it can
Mm-hmm.
feel like, oh, I'm supposed to be okay too, even though I had a similar trauma. We can start to
Oh.
compare ourselves to somebody's later stage when
Mm-hmm.
we're at a different stage. And we think we're
Ah.
doing it wrong because we don't feel strong, because we don't feel healed, because we don't feel like we're past something enough.
Uh-huh.
So the confusion is just because, where I'm going is to a more satisfied, fulfilled place doesn't mean I'm there now or I should be there now.
Mm-hmm.
It's valid to be walking the walk toward that place.
Mm-hmm.
It's valid to feel if you feel broken, if you feel that you've been victimized. Anything that you're experiencing is a completely valid place along the path that you're on.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I think good therapy involves acceptance. You know,
Mm-hmm.
a therapist helping you to learn to accept yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, the tricky part is to find a therapist who is um, able to accept themselves as well as you. We're
Oh.
all human.
Mm-hmm.
So it can be, that's why I tell people, when you're looking for a therapist, if you feel like, judged or something right from the get go, you might want to try somebody else
Mm-hmm.
because it can be a while to find the right fit with somebody who is at least you know, enough healed in their own process that they can
Mm-hmm.
accept you and yours.
That's a really interesting way to put that. Huh. And so you called that post-traumatic. Sorry, don't let me speak into that way. You said it's post-traumatic growth.
Growth.
Wow,
Yeah,
I've never heard
yeah.
of that.
I've heard of that term. I'm not an expert in it. I'm not a trauma
Mm-hmm.
specialist, but there's literature on it. If you're interested, you can just, type in that phrase
Yeah,
and read about it.
yeah, I'm going to have to
I
because if that goes along with what you were talking about, that little bit of comparison, that kind of goes in line with recovery as well, because people have different walks of recovery. Not everyone is the same. And I
right,
watch people compare themselves, and then it just can destroy them too.
right.
So
Because
it's,
again, it's like I'm not good enough. I'm not enough. I'm not
mm-hmm,
doing it right.
yeah,
And I don't. I think emotionally healing. It's hard to heal in an atmosphere of judgment and criticism.
mm-hmm, it is. And
Just
so
like
that,
it's hard to heal physically when you're constantly your wound is being scratched or scraped open.
mm-hmm, yeah. Uh, but isn't there a type of therapy though where you are exposed to your triggers and such so that you can get desensitized to them, correct?
Yes, especially with phobias.
Mm-hmm.
Um, uh, Exposure and response prevention is kind of as far as I know, what I recall about this, that's the gold standard of treatment for phobias. If you're
Mm.
afraid of snakes, what we
Mm-hmm.
want to do with you is we want to get you into a room with a snake and have your nervous system just completely relax and be cool so that you can. Exposure is exposure to the snake. Response
Mm-hmm.
prevention is we keep you from running out of the room. You have to stay
Ah.
still. And then eventually your body gets exhausted
Mm-hmm.
from being, afraid. And then so that's one type of exposure therapy that you might have heard of.
Mm-hmm.
But what you also might be talking about is something about exposure to triggers. Oh, also OCD, maybe obsessive
Mm.
compulsive disorder might
Yeah.
involve exposure and response prevention.
Mm-hmm.
But I think with trauma, that sort of exposure, I think there might be different schools of thought on exposure
Mm.
to triggers.
Mm-hmm.
But in any case, if people are exposed to triggers and trauma, what you want to avoid is re-traumatization. Like just
Mm.
willy-nilly exposing yourself to triggers is not.
Yeah.
I don't think it's necessarily healing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it has to be. I think you might want to actually have an interview with a trauma specialist, someone who works with
Oh, yeah.
survivors of trauma all day long. That would be a very interesting interview.
That would be. Um, And I know I've interviewed some of them on that, but not we didn't hit that part. So that is definitely
Mm,
something I'm going to have to get back with on a
yeah.
couple of them. But you did bring up something that reminded me something right out of your own book, and it's the red flags or the flags that we ignore end up controlling us, and that kind of hit me on with what you were talking about. Um,
I'm trying to
kind of,
remember. It's
sort
been a
of.
while since I've read my book. You're going to have to
Oh, I'm
help
sure,
me out.
but so what you're saying is whenever you're experiencing traumas, so you're having, say, in your book, you use the example, you keep getting a loser boyfriend or something, and you keep
Hmm.
going, I don't want him, but you're ignoring the red flags early on in the
Right.
relationship or
Yes.
before. Yeah, so it
Right.
kind of sounds similar to that, or am I kind of reaching out on a limb there?
No, no. Well, I do want to say, because I did not say this enough at all in my book, from what I
Mm-hmm.
recall. But constructive wallowing is not a trauma treatment.
No,
I mean, I think
no, no, no.
with trauma, you want to treat emotions um, kind of in a special way. It's constructive wallowing is more kind of like day-to-day emotions.
Mm-hmm.
I really didn't say that. I think I might have sort of mentioned that in passing once,
Mm-hmm.
but really, that's if people are aware that they have trauma or whatever, I wouldn't. Constructive wallowing is a tool for sure in
Mm-hmm.
dealing with emotions, but I would absolutely seek treatment with a trauma specialist. But so with that, a disclaimer.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about missing red flags. I think the idea is other people might see red flags
Mm-hmm.
in our dating or in our relationships that completely go over our heads. And there are
Mm-hmm.
different ways to think about it, but one of the ways that I think about it is it's like when you haven't been safe in relationships in the past,
Mm-hmm.
your your safety meter, it goes kind of off because
Mm-hmm.
your baseline is you're not safe. You're
Mm-hmm.
not safe. So if somebody who isn't terribly safe comes into your view, the meter isn't going to go ding 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 ding. Unless
Mm.
they're holding a gun to your head, your meter is
Yeah.
not going to really go. The alarm's not going to go off.
Mm-hmm.
So you end up missing what other people see as clear red flags. Somebody who's very controlling, for example, somebody who doesn't want you to hang out with your family or friends.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if you're used to that kind of control, and unfortunately, lots of people are, they're
Mm-hmm.
not going to go, oh, I don't like that. I'm going to stay away from that. Or they might say, I really don't like that, but
Mm-hmm.
what are you going to do? It's part of relationships, right? He wants
Yeah.
to control me. He loves me. So there's a whole different framework that you may
Mm-hmm.
have um, embraced just because of your experience.
Mm. That's a really good way to put that. Um, but since you did mention this is not about trauma necessarily, let's get down to the nitty gritty emotions. Uh,
Okay.
because that's what constructive wallowing is all about, is understanding your emotions and getting to understand what, to me, I got what is emotional intellect of a sort, right? Because
Hmm.
I didn't know what it was. I was like, I got like 4 or 5 emotions tops, and I'm not able to express like half of them in public. So,
Right. Right.
like, uh, but constructive wallowing, whenever I first read the title, I was like, this is not gonna work. I was like,
Right.
what is this? And how to have beat bad feelings by having them. I was like, no, I've been drinking alcohol for 10 years trying to get away from the bad feelings. I found what works. Why do I need to have them? So,
Right.
how did you say in your book how you got started with it? And I read introduction, and I started crying. I had to put down the book, and I was like, okay, I'm sold. So, what
Wow.
was it?
So, well, sorry, let me ask you about that. So there
Uh-huh.
was a real sense of recognition there for you
Mm-hmm.
when you started reading that book. Something,
Oh yeah.
and I often say when a book, really touches you, it's because there's something in you that is so ready for that message that already
Mm-hmm.
knows what you're reading is true.
Yeah.
And so it sounds like it spoke to a part of you that spoke right back and said, yeah, I know. I know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's why it took me like a month and a half to read your book, because I would read it and then I would put it down. I'd think about it for a couple days, and then I'd pick it back up, reread it, and then read a little bit more, and so on and so forth. And so I really internalized that book because I was like, there's so much good stuff in here, because that's what really got me into the mental health like advocacy and just sitting there wanting to be a therapist myself.
Great,
You
great,
and my therapist, y'all two were the factors that made me go like, I'm going to do whatever I can to help out, because if my emotions could hold me back so much, why are we not letting more people feel them? And
right. You have such great qualities to be a therapist because the courage that it takes to read a book that has wallowing on the title, when that is the most dangerous thing you could think of to do,
mhm,
that is an amazing quality for a therapist to have. Because, your clients need to be able to trust that you've got their back,
mhm,
and you cannot have their back if you don't have your own. If you,
mm,
if you don't have the courage to kind of look full in the face at your own insides and your own feelings, then what are you
mhm,
really doing with
yeah.
your clients?
Ooh,
Um,
well, thank
so
you.
yeah, and I want to say I often say this, that I wrote this book for people who would probably never read it, people who would look at the title and go, ugh, wallowing, ew, I don't want to do that. So it's it's
Mhm.
it's rare when they actually read it, but it's pretty gratifying. So now I've talked around in a circle and I've forgotten what the original question or point that you were making.
No, you're totally fine, and I really appreciate that, because I just want to help, and I just have a great example to go by. So, but in your book, you told uh, the reader how you came about the truth technique and
Yes.
all of
Okay.
this. So, the truth technique is like the fruit of the book. Uh, and at first, I was like, reading it, I was like, man, I kind of like part of this, like, I know, but I wasn't acknowledging it that whole time. And then there was that test in the book where it was like, all right, here, do this. I did the test, and I was like, all right, I got a high score. And then I flipped the page, and I was like, oh no. The higher the score, the worse. And I got really high. But whenever I finally got to the truth technique, it all started to click. And I was like, oh.
That's
So,
great. Yeah.
yeah.
So the truth technique, it's a 5-part, not step, 5-part process
Mm-hmm.
that just kind of spells out the word. I fixed it, wiggled it around so that it would spell out the word truth. It's just my attempt to operationalize something that is a truth that's been known since long before you and I were born. It goes
Mm-hmm.
back at least to the 1960s with Alan Watts and his wonderful book, The Wisdom of Insecurity, and probably
Mm.
a lot further back than that as well. Just this idea that accepting emotions is the way to truly let them go.
Mm.
We try to let our feelings go by ignoring them, forgetting them, not thinking about them, and that of course keeps them stuck in place.
Mm-hmm.
But accepting them without uh, resistance is hard. It's like,
Yeah.
here, punch me in the face, I won't move. That's what it's like to have to accept a negative emotion.
Oh
But if,
yeah.
if we can do that, that's how we master them. That's how we gain back control of ourselves and a sense of that we're in control of ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
which is kind of what we're looking for, I think. We
Yeah.
don't want to be controlled by our emotions, and we don't want to find them scary and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
So, would you like me to kind of walk through the truth technique?
Yeah. Real quick, before we do, some
Yeah.
people might have got scared at the word emotion and
Okay.
went, I'm done listening, or maybe they're still listening. So, real quick, for me, I was terrified of big emotions and those negative ones, or quote unquote negative ones.
Right.
And so, in your book, you told us a negative, or the peak of an emotion, happens and lasts for about 90 seconds. So,
Maybe.
if y'all are listening and you're afraid, don't worry, it's going to be over soon enough.
Yes. Yes. I don't know if this is in the book, but it probably is. When you're super happy or feeling amazing about something, those rare times when you're just like, oh, I love how I feel. You
Hmm.
you try to hang on to it as long as you can, don't you? I mean,
Hmm.
I wish I could feel this way forever.
Uh-huh.
You know, if I'm feeling content or excited or surprised or in love or something, I want to feel that way forever. And so I just like embrace it, I savor it, I, really wallow in it.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens to that feeling? It goes away
Mm-hmm.
because it gets to do what emotions all do if they are allowed to do what they naturally do, which is
Mm-hmm.
it gets triggered, it arises and peaks, and then it dissipates.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like a yawn or a sneeze. There's an onset and then a
Ah.
peak and then it's over. But with so yeah, so if we can, I don't want to use the word savor, but something if we can embrace
Mm-hmm.
a negative feeling that we really don't want to have, it will do the same thing that good feelings do. It'll peak
Mm-hmm.
and it'll go away. And if you
Mm-hmm.
feel like, wait a minute, I've been feeling depressed for years.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, some people might say, I've been feeling the same way every day for years of my life.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that is can be explained by, well, first of all, depression is not an emotion. Depression is kind of a result of the emotions being kind of the works being gummed up. And when
Mm-hmm.
you're depressed, I mean, it's different from sadness.
Mm-hmm.
Sadness is more acute.
Yeah.
Depression is more a state of the machinery rather than an emotion.
Mm.
But let's say
Okay.
you've been feeling, sad every day. Well, it
Mm-hmm.
may be that every time the feeling comes up and
Mm-hmm.
you see it out of the corner of your eye, you go, I don't want to feel that. And maybe you
Mm-hmm.
bat it away
Mm-hmm.
naturally, because nobody
Yeah.
wants to feel
Yeah.
sad. But of course, the feeling is still unfelt and it's like tapping you on the shoulder. What about now? Can I come up? What about now? Is now okay?
Uh-huh.
No? Okay, I'll come back later. So you may be plagued. That's
Mm-hmm.
that's one possibility, and another is that the feeling is triggered again and again and again every day because you're faced with a situation that isn't changing.
Mm-hmm.
And in that case, the problem that needs to be solved is in the situation. It's not in
Mm-hmm.
your feelings. Your feelings are matching this
Mm.
unchanging situation.
Okay. Gotcha. Um, so that leads us right into the perfect example of why don't you walk us through the truth technique?
Okay, and you can help me maybe because you've probably read this more recently than I have. So when you're having, first of all, you can only do this when you're actually having a feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you're having a feeling. You
Yeah.
can't. This is not an intellectual exercise that you do, in Hawaii while you're sipping a drink and remembering that you had a feeling once. This is like in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so do you want to imagine a scenario where you're having a feeling right now?
Um, yeah. Yeah, I got one in my head. Okay,
Okay,
so do you want me to walk you through the scenario real quick?
yeah, that'd
All
be
right.
great.
So let's say at a past job, I had a coworker that seemed to be either incompetent and or lazy, but they were newer to the job than me. They were younger and therefore less experienced. But I'm getting upset at their work ethic, right? So I'm sitting here and I'm a little upset at their work ethic because of those factors. So now we can go through the truth
The
technique.
truth technique. Okay, so
Mm-hmm.
number one, tell yourself the situation. So you just
So,
did that.
mm-hmm.
In
Yep.
a way, you said, okay, here I am at this job. Here's this newbie who
Mm-hmm.
looks to me like they're barely working,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm upset about it.
Yeah.
Did I miss something? What would you
No,
add to that?
that would be a good summary of it.
Okay, so that's T, tell yourself the situation. And then the R, which is often difficult, is I
Mm-hmm.
think it's realize what you're feeling.
Yep.
Okay,
So,
so
um, I'm mad that without a feelings will, I'm mad. This is
yeah,
before I read Constructive Wallowing me. I'm just mad.
I think mad is very understandable, but we can talk about why. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that would be the first one that might come to mind. What else? Anything?
Let's see. So I'm not just mad. Maybe I'm a little bit jealous because he seems to get uh, the big end of the stick. He gets a lot of leniency. Boss sees him around. He doesn't tell him anything. But if I slack a little bit, I get yelled at immediately, that kind of thing.
Totally.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. So you're mad and jealous.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Anything else?
Um, I'd say that those are two good ones that we can kind of explore because they may not be what they actually say they are,
Right,
you
right,
know?
right. Yeah. So it sounds like the first one that came to mind was mad, and that's very
Mm-hmm.
understandable. So then that was R. Then we
Mm-hmm.
get to the U, and the U is
Mm-hmm.
uncover self criticism.
Mm-hmm.
Do you
So,
remember what that one's about?
yep. So self-criticism is, why am I feeling mad? Well, I'm kind of feeling mad because, let's say, uh, he uh, gets paid the same amount of money and he has less experience than me, right? So, um,
Okay,
go ahead.
sorry about this. That sounds like try to understand yourself.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Yeah. So uncovering self criticism is like, but when you
This is
started
a
by
hard one.
saying, why do I feel this way?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, sometimes that can be said in a very self critical way. What's wrong with me?
Mm.
Why am I being so petty?
Mm-hmm.
I shouldn't feel this way.
Yes, that's right. That's right. So,
Yeah.
why am I so angry? Why am I jealous? Um, and
I'm so,
then, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
well, just like I'm so small minded, or I'm not
Mm.
patient, or, I
Oh
should be
yeah.
nicer to him or
Oh
her.
yeah. Or maybe I could help them out too. Like, why aren't I doing something?
Why aren't I helping? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oof. I, I,
Ooh,
I cringe
yeah.
just,
Thinking about
because
that
it's
one kind of makes me think I have responsibility in my own feelings now.
right. So, I mean, the uncovering self criticism will usually unearth something like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm a bad person for feeling this way,
Mm.
essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
you want to kind of get, because and the reason that's there is because we really want to get deep into if there's shame or something softer underneath
Mm-hmm.
that is fueling the reaction.
Mm-hmm.
And we want to let it go because when we criticize ourselves, as I said a little bit ago, it's hard to heal in the presence of criticism.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of criticizing ourselves, oh, I shouldn't feel this way, I'm being so petty, we
Mm-hmm.
go to the next T, which is try to understand yourself. Try to
Yes,
understand, why would a good person feel angry when this newbie is slacking?
because I'm not helping. That's what I would say to myself, because I'm not
Oh,
doing something to actually help, because I'm the person with more experience. They're new. Why can't I do something to help them? I
okay.
see something. Yeah.
I'm glad you're saying this, Keegan, because I'm hearing self-criticism
Mm-hmm.
in your, I should be helping,
Mm-hmm.
you know. Um, the if you try to take your own side, which the
Mm-hmm.
second T is about, you might say anyone would get angry in the face of an injustice. It is
Mm-hmm.
unfair that we're getting paid the same and I'm doing all the work and this person is not. That's
Mm-hmm.
not fair.
Yeah.
No wonder I'm angry. We humans get angry in the face of injustice.
Mm-hmm.
We like fairness. It's normal and natural to get angry when it seems like we're in an unfair situation.
Mm-hmm.
That's taking your own side.
Mm. That way, you're your own best friend.
Right, that's what that second T is about. Try to understand yourself. You,
Mm-hmm.
not that newbie person,
Mm-hmm.
you know, because the truth technique is not about how you treat other people or what you're going to do about it. It's about how
Mm-hmm.
you treat yourself when you're having a
Mm.
feeling of anger. Do you
Mm-hmm.
race to judgment? You should be
Mm-mm.
nicer or you should do more? Or do you just go, yeah, yeah, I see why you're angry?
Mm-hmm. But so many people think that anger is a bad emotion. So why
Well,
would you want? Why do we like to or not like to admit anger? Because it's negative. So
right,
this is how we get through it, though.
right. I mean, I think a lot of us grow up with pretty not great models about anger.
Mm-hmm.
Some of us grow up in homes where anger is frightening and loud and scary and damaging.
Mm-hmm.
Others grow up in homes where anger is never seen.
Mm-hmm.
So it must be terrifying if you can never express anger. It must be something very, very bad. So we have
Mm-hmm.
these different models or lack thereof of how to just have a healthy anger and express it
Mm-hmm.
in a normal, reasonable way.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay to be angry. And it, to me, it doesn't, feeling angry doesn't feel bad as
Mm-hmm.
bad as feeling ashamed of myself feels. That feels much worse to me than anger.
Mm-hmm.
Or remorse feels
Mm-hmm.
worse to me than anger. A lot of things feel worse to me than anger. Anger is problematic if we don't know what to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
It's the behavior around anger that's a problem. But I
Yeah.
think a lot of people are walking around with very good reasons to be angry, and
Oh
they
yeah.
have no outlet for
Mm-hmm.
their anger. And depression has been described as anger turned inwards. You may have heard that
Ooh.
before.
Mm-mm. I have not heard that before, but that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, because when there's no outlet for your anger, the last
Mm-hmm.
thing you can do with it is like aim it at yourself.
Yep. So how would someone go about having that mad feeling without
Hmm.
directing it towards themselves?
Okay,
Because that's that last H,
that's
right?
the H. Right, is have the feeling. So
Mm-hmm.
anger is a feeling that does like to get physical because there's
Mm-hmm.
a lot of energy
Mm-hmm.
potentially in anger, especially in rage. That's where pillows come in, yelling in a soundproof room, taking self defense classes where you can just
Mm-hmm.
beat the crap out of somebody in a Michelin Man outfit. So go for a swim, something that takes a lot of exertion
mm-hmm.
to just get rid of the physical. There are a lot of healthy things you can do physically to kind of burn off some of that energy. But I think
Mm-hmm.
one of the most important things you can do is to acknowledge and understand and be okay with the fact that you're angry, and good people get angry. There is some
Mm-hmm.
research that gets thrown at me when I talk about this, and it's like research that showed that
Mm-hmm.
allowing people to be angry just makes them angrier. And
Mm-hmm.
if you actually read the study,
Mm-hmm.
what happened was people were made angry and there was no acknowledgement, no visibility, no
Mm-hmm.
attempt to meet them where they were, and that does make you angrier. It's like the
Mm-hmm.
the shouting at the wind and the or the lack of whatever you call it. I'm not good with analogies, but it's the lack
Being
of
heard,
being heard.
essentially.
Yes, there's de-escalation
Mm-hmm.
tactics. I've never taken a de-escalation class that I recall, but I know that they teach de-escalation, and
Mm-hmm.
I actually maybe I did have one time took some de-escalation training when I was working at a nonprofit, and I think one of the things to do was not to like calm down, not to try to
Mm-hmm.
get the person to calm down, but to match their energy and say,
Mm-hmm.
yes, that is frustrating, to kind of meet them up there and say, I know that's very frustrating. And
Huh.
you basically let them know they're seen.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as you feel seen, and you called it, you
Mm-hmm.
called it, as soon as they feel heard and seen, they begin to calm down.
Mm-hmm.
Because, anger can almost be like just an escalating terror of being completely alone and
Mm-hmm.
misunderstood and
Yeah.
ousted from the group.
Yeah. Yeah. It could be total being afraid. It could just be fear.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
because I've learned a lot that anger or some other emotions I've had are secondary emotions. They may not be the actual cause. And so that's why I'm kind of glad that you were able to sit there and back me up on that technique, because that's what my therapist did the first time too. Because she was like, no, 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 go back. And I was like, but and I have a feeling that that's the way a lot of people would work through this,
Mhm.
because it makes sense, because that's the way that my brain just kind of works, but that's because of the conditioning it's had.
Right, right.
So,
That's why, I think I put a number of examples in the book, but if there's not something that's kind of exactly like what you're going through, it can be hard to
mm-hmm,
overlay on your own. So it's good to practice and maybe to have a partner to practice with.
mm-hmm.
But I love
Oh,
that
go
you're
ahead,
that
go ahead.
you're um, mentioning that anger is a secondary emotion.
Mm-hmm,
It so often is. I mean, I think pure anger as a primary emotion comes from a sense of injustice, and that's the
mm,
whole of it. I think injustice equals anger. Any other anger that comes up, like angry at people moving in next door who I don't like the look of them? I mean, there can be certainly fear underlying that. I don't know how to talk
Mm-hmm.
to those people. I've never
Mm-hmm.
met someone like that. What's going to
Mm-hmm.
happen? Are they? Am I in danger?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm angry that they moved in next door to me because I'm
Yeah.
afraid of them.
Yeah.
So that fear is a perfect example of a primary emotion that anger might masquerade as.
Mm-hmm. And that's the thing, is that working through those emotions really lets me know where they stand in me, because once one dissipates, then the other one popped up. And
Right.
we're at the 40-ish minute mark. So I wonder if we can tackle the bunnies in the cage scenario, because that's kind of why
Okay.
we can't have emotions sometimes. At least in my case, because I had emotions. You couldn't tell me I didn't, but they were all negative.
Mm-hmm. So I think that was about trapping your emotions inside and not really
Hmm.
finding ways to express them.
Yep.
They just tend to get they multiply,
Yeah.
or in the case of emotions, they get bigger. And there's also the idea that they're also like butterflies in a barn, where you might want to let the blue ones out, the pretty happy
Uh huh.
ones, but the red ones also get out if you open a window. So
Hmm.
they're either all out or they're all in. So
Hmm.
so if we're suppressing our emotions, if we're just trying not to feel our rage or whatever, our fear, and we're hiding it from ourselves, we're also not going to feel a lot of joy
Hmm.
or a lot of just lovely, nice feelings. We're going to be kind of like monotone,
Mm.
emotionally monotone.
Uh huh. And that's kind of where that depression would kind of come into play. You,
Yes,
because
exactly,
now you have your new baseline, and so it
exactly.
because I have bipolar. So I understand what it's like to feel in the extremes, but whenever I'm in the middle, I don't really feel that much. And
Ah,
so that's kind of similar in a way, I would
mm-hmm.
think.
Yeah, that's great that you picked up on that. That monotone being kind of one manifestation of a depression.
Hmm.
Um, and how long, I mean, is it okay if I ask about your bipolar
Yeah.
diagnosis?
So I think I was diagnosed bipolar whenever I was back in high school.
Mm-hmm.
But then whenever I went to rehab 3 years ago, that's where I was re-diagnosed, and now I'm medicated properly. So it is getting to the point where it is manageable. I am feeling, but there's still that weird feeling of like I'm not feeling the all the way, but it's still so much better than it used to be. So
Yeah,
yeah.
that sounds like a kind of a challenging experience to have,
Hmm.
emotions that are extreme. I mean, they feel
Hmm.
extreme. And then in order to kind of get those under control, everything gets flattened out.
Hmm.
Is that your experience, that you kind of do have
Yeah.
more of like a monotone?
Well, it kind of depends. So for a while, I was on antidepressants
Hmm.
when I was in high school. But one day I was watching stand-up comedy, and I was like, I'm not laughing, and so cut those off. I never touched anything else again except for anti-anxiety medication, and then I was off of that for a few years, and then got uh, where I'm at now. And it's weird because everything has its ups and downs, and I've just now found what works the best. And really, the missing piece was therapy and knowing how to work with my emotions.
Hmm.
So, and that's the thing, is I was letting them control me. I wasn't learning how to manage them.
Hmm.
So,
Or express them in
mm-hmm,
ways that were satisfying and significant.
mm-hmm,
And also, nature is playing a role for you.
yeah,
You talked about that a few episodes back. That it sounds like you feel
mm-hmm,
quite, quite good
mm-hmm,
when you're
yes,
out there.
yeah. I don't know if it's because that's just who I am, or it's because I grew up outside so much, but there's something about being out in nature that just kind of it de-stresses my body on a subconscious level, and it's really interesting.
Yeah, well, it sounds like it's pretty conscious for you, and I admire that, and I kind of envy that, because I feel like I feel, I mean, I believe that there's research that
Mm-hmm.
shows that our mental health is improved by spending time just outdoors
Mm-hmm.
with a little bit of nature, like a tree, a plant. So
Yeah.
it's good for all of us, but you're really in touch with the
Mm-hmm.
difference that it makes for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's pretty cool.
And I think it kind of has to deal with I've tried so many different things, but at the same time, I also stopped because I was in such a depressive state for so long that I was letting my BPD win, I was letting my alcoholism win. I was essentially a shell of a person. And so in recovery, I'm actually becoming who I was again and then building on top of that. So it's a really weird, like, time machine game because it's like I went back, found the part of me that I lost, and it's like, hey, bud, come on up here. And then he's like, oh, cool. And then it's like, oh, by the way, I'm catching you up on like 10 years of stuff and go. And it's it's really interesting, but the intricacies of it make it so beautiful at the same time because I wouldn't want to change the past, but damn, was it hard.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I know that my past is nothing compared to other people's. And so that's why I'm trying to really help. I'm not comparing. No, no. I saw that look. I'm what I'm saying is that I know that for me, my story is my story. I
Mhm.
want other people to know that their story is their story too, and they can be heard, because that keeps so many people quiet. And your
Yeah.
book helps people get a voice within themselves. And I think that that is where it really kind of starts, is having that inner
That's
voice.
Yeah,
So.
that's the hope, is that through the darkness and the difficulty and the heaviness and the anguish and the hard things about our emotional lives and our wounding that makes it
Hmm.
so acutely awful, through that we kind of make our way to a better place, a more expansive place with not we're
Hmm.
not different people, but we can express our full whole selves differently.
Hmm. Yeah. And
That's the hope.
I think that we're getting there one step and one day at a time. Uh, and it starts with normalizing therapy, normalizing mental health, and just normalizing that it's okay to ask for help too, or say
Very
I'm
much so.
not okay. It's okay.
Yeah,
So.
because the fact is, most of us are not like 100% okay, just for various reasons. And, pretending that we're okay, it just makes us harder to relate to.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a big one right there. Uh, and I may have thought about that before, but it never really clicked. Why am I feeling like this? But everyone else says I'm doing good. You know.
Mm.
Mm.
There's that whole comparing our insides to other people's
Hmm.
outsides.
My Facebook reel to yours, right? My people in social media, kind of seeing what some people do and their highlights, their vacations versus my vacation.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah, it.
right.
Uh, but all I know is that it's not easy to do it. And like you said at the very beginning, having the right therapist or the right support system is crucial. Uh, so, one of my questions on that is, for someone that's curious about finding a therapist, what are some of the questions that you would ask finding a therapist that's, well, right for you?
Yeah, great question.
Okay.
I mean, I would, after I have presented my problem or whatever it is that I'm experiencing in life, I might ask the therapist, what do you hear in that? How would you work with me?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Because a therapist, we have all different modalities and approaches and theories that we're coming from,
Mm-hmm.
but someone who mm, I think it's important to come with some ideas,
Mm-hmm.
to be able to conceptualize what's going on in a way
Mm-hmm.
that the client can understand. So I
Mm.
would want to know that, well, I guess, I would want to know that the therapist heard, what I'm going through.
Mm.
Can they even say back to me what's important to me about what happens in therapy?
Ah.
So just can they reflect me,
Mm-hmm.
or are they coming at me immediately with, here's how I work with people?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, there's nothing entirely wrong with here's how I work with people. You
Mm-hmm.
want someone who knows, who has a way, an approach or whatever. So,
Mm-hmm.
it's not black or white. You want to feel through, is this person responding to me? Are they
Mm-hmm.
talking to me, or am I like a little toffee in a machine that's getting stamped as I go
Mm.
through?
Yeah. That's a big one right there. You definitely want to be treated like a person, not a number.
A unique
Um,
person.
a unique person. Ooh, that's even
Yeah.
better. Um, but yeah, so I really appreciate that little tidbit of advice because you never know who's actually right on the verge of saying, "I'm going to go get help," and then they don't know what to ask, or so many
Right.
people are just right there, but they just don't take that next step.
Right.
So,
I think that's true, and it's tragic. And
mm,
yeah, you want to feel like your therapist, isn't judging you. Basically,
yeah,
here's the thing: if you sit down with a therapist and you talk, and you have an uneasy feeling,
mm-hmm,
that you just have an uneasy feeling about them,
mm-hmm,
and it's not, oh, this person actually cares about me, and that's uncomfortable. If it's
uh-huh,
kind of just like, not sure I can trust this person because of little things or whatever,
uh-huh,
that's I think it's important to listen to your
mm-hmm,
inner voice,
yeah,
because no matter what you've been through, I feel like there's always, deep down, there is an inner voice that is super wise and knows exactly what you need and what you need to stay away from.
mm-hmm, yeah, and it's just learning how to tune into that voice and hear it out sometimes.
Yeah.
Because I know that I've heard it whenever I was going through the truth technique. Like, just what is that feeling that I'm having? Oh, that's jealousy. Oh, that's shame. Oh, okay. And
Yeah,
then it's like,
but it takes
and
a lot of
some,
courage to do
yeah,
that.
yeah. And then sometimes I instantly know what I need, but it was the exact same thing that I was avoiding. It's interesting how that
I
works.
know. Yeah, that's kind of the tricky thing. So that's why when you're talking to a therapist, if you're uncomfortable,
Hmm.
maybe because they care, or because they're too gentle with you, or something like along those lines,
Hmm.
that might be, your little voice may say, okay, give it a little bit more time. Let's see if
Hmm.
this is something I can tolerate and if it's good
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah. So having a little voice that's a little colorblind.
Yeah.
Just it's a green flag. It might be a red flag, but hang
Yeah,
on.
not sure. There's a flag, but I'm not sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
certainly give it enough time to know, to have a
Okay.
sense like, okay, I kind of get that I don't feel good about myself after
Mm,
talking to this person.
gotcha.
If that's the case,
Hmm. Okay.
am I
Uh,
breaking up?
you did for just a second.
Okay, so I mean, if you feel like you don't feel good about yourself after talking
Hmm.
to a particular therapist, that's kind of a bad sign.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Unless it's that you feel ashamed that you opened up so much, in which case, it may be just par for the course. It's so hard to give a
It
hard
is.
and fast rule about this, except for listen to yourself and give it enough time to know how you feel.
And I think some people needed to hear exactly that though. So, uh, I mean, you are the therapist. You are knowing what some people's inner gut is telling them before they even know it. I would say, eh,
Hmm,
you have a
maybe.
good radar. You have a good roadmap. You can say, yeah,
Yeah.
because
Yeah, also, this reminds me, there's also a danger of getting ahead of the client
ooh,
as a therapist, or even as a friend, getting ahead of
mm,
your friend before they're ready to hear something or know something about themselves. That's a
ooh,
that's a problem when you're trying to help somebody grow,
mm,
change, heal, whatever, is getting ahead of them.
ooh, that's a
So
good one.
yeah, it is. It's very subtle. You have to stay with them where they're at,
Hmm.
with acceptance. Acceptance doesn't keep people stuck.
Yeah,
Acceptance helps people get unstuck.
I think
It's
a lot.
it's a
Go.
paradox.
Yes, it is. I was about to say it's one of the amazing paradoxes. uh, and
Great
that's a lot
minds.
of yep, it's a lot of mental health. It really is, because one thing causes this, but at the same time, it's exactly what I needed.
Yeah,
Um, but
exactly.
we are near the end of the episode.
Right.
So here at Retrieving Sanity, we do like to try to have people on multiple times. Whether you write a new book, we want to explore the truth technique a little bit more, or we want to explore the paradoxes in mental health. So could I ask, could we possibly see you back on Retrieving Sanity at some point in the
Of
future?
course. Yeah, it would be my honor.
Awesome. Well, it'd be my honor as well because it's already been a privilege having you on. So,
It's
um,
been great talking to you. I appreciate your spirit, your curiosity, your compassion, and
well,
just
thank you.
just your soul. You bring it to your work here, and I think you're doing a great service for a lot of people, for everyone who listens.
Well, I appreciate it. But it really is just to help everyone else. And did you know, though, that we have a national suicide hotline that is of very simple three numbers?
Oh, three numbers. Is it
Uh huh.
311?
Oh, no, it's 988.
988.
Yeah, it's right.
It's
Right behind me.
terrible that I didn't know that.
Oh, no, it's okay. Not,
988.
yeah, not a lot of people know, but that's why we got to let everyone know. If we can teach our kids how to dial 911, why can't we teach our friends and loved ones to dial 988? So,
Brilliant. I love that.
but before we go, are there any shout outs that you want to do? Any social links or just anyone or anything in particular you want to give a shout out to?
Well, just to everybody in recovery, I admire what you're doing. Um, Belated congratulations to you on three
Oh,
years, is it?
yes, ma'am. Thank
Was
you.
it? Yep. And if anybody is interested in um, the work that I'm doing around estrangement or whatever, you can find me at tinagilbertson.com. And I have another website at reconnectionclub.com. That's for parents whose adult children are not
Mhm.
talking to them. It's a pretty specific group of
Gotcha.
people.
That is awesome, though. And you do have a podcast with that, don't you not?
Yeah, I do. It's the
Uh,
Reconnection Club podcast, also for that same group of people whose adult children are not talking to them. So the Reconnection Club podcast is available wherever you get your podcasts.
that is way too cool. Well, I hope we get some listeners to your station. And then again, I kind of hope we don't because then that means that there's more strange children out there. So, I
Yep.
mean, that's one of those double edged swords. I hope the people that need you find you, and I hope that the people that don't know that there's a source out there for those that they do know. So,
And right back at you. Same.
well, thank you
Yeah.
very
So
much.
thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
It has been a pleasure as well. And that is all the time that we have. So, for everyone listening, thank you for checking us out on WDJY FM. This has been our very special guest, Tina Gilbertson.